The rain had been a relentless companion for the last 2 hours, a drumming symphony against the roof of the vintage Bentley, as it snaked its way up the winding drive. Elara pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the silhouettes of ancient oaks blur into impressionistic smudges of green and grey. The air, even through the sealed window, seemed to hum with the scent of wet earth and pine, a wild, untamed fragrance that sharpened her senses. She was a perfumer, among other things, and every nuance of the world translated into an aromatic note in her mind. This evening, it was a dark, earthy vetiver, underscored by the metallic tang of an approaching storm. The estate, when it finally materialized through the deluge, was a sprawling stone edifice, ancient yet impeccably maintained, its Gothic elegance softened by the glow of lamplit windows. It looked less like a house and more like a secret waiting to be unveiled. This was Blackwood Manor, the elusive sanctuary of Julian Thorne. Her driver, a man named Marcus whose stoicism matched the weather, opened her door with a quiet click. A gust of wind, heavy with rain, whipped at her silk scarf, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed composure she wore like a second skin. Elara clutched her portfolio, its leather cool and smooth beneath her fingers, a reassuring anchor. The immense oak door, studded with iron, swung inward silently, revealing a cavernous hall. It was a space that spoke of history and quiet power, lit by the flickering dance of a massive fireplace, its flames casting dancing shadows on tapestries that hung like whispered secrets. The air inside was warm, rich with the scent of burning cedar, old leather, and something else. Something subtly expensive and utterly captivating. A custom blend, she suspected, designed to evoke a specific mood. A man emerged from the shadows near a towering grandfather clock, his movements fluid and unhurried. He was tall, dressed in dark, impeccably tailored trousers and a charcoal cashmere sweater that clung to the breadth of his shoulders. His hair, dark as midnight, was swept back from a lean, aristocratic face. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, met hers across the vast expanse of the hall. Julian Thorne. He was more imposing, more compelling than any photograph could convey. There was an intensity in his gaze that felt like a physical touch, a slow burn that started deep within her. "Miss Vance?" His voice was a low rumble, rich and resonant, like a cello string plucked in the quiet of a concert hall. It sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Welcome to Blackwood. I trust your journey wasn't too arduous." "Mr. Thorne," Elara replied, her voice, usually so steady, carrying a faint tremor she hoped he wouldn't detect. "The journey was atmospheric. Thank you for having me." He offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile, a fleeting curve of his lips that hinted at something both charming and dangerous. "Please call me Julian, and I insist you make yourself comfortable. Marcus will take your luggage." He gestured towards a sweeping staircase, its polished wood gleaming. "I've arranged for you to stay in the West Wing. Given the storm, I wouldn't dream of sending you back to the city tonight." Her breath hitched. She hadn't anticipated staying. Her initial plan was a late afternoon presentation, then a return to her curated solitude. But the thought of a long, treacherous drive back in this weather had been a quiet dread. Now a different kind of apprehension, laced with a strange excitement, bloomed in her chest. "That's very kind of you, Julian," she managed, her gaze still caught in the magnetic pull of his. He stepped closer, and the air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an invisible energy. She caught the subtle, sophisticated scent of his cologne, sandalwood, a hint of leather, and something uniquely masculine. It mingled with the house's scent, creating an intoxicating tapestry. "Not kindness, Elara," he corrected, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Practicality. Besides, it gives us more time to discuss the project, and perhaps to truly appreciate the essence of your artistry." His eyes lingered on hers, a silent question passing between them, a recognition of something beyond professional courtesy. He was not merely observing her, he was seeing her, peeling back the layers she meticulously constructed. He led her through a labyrinth of hallways, each one revealing new layers of the manor's character, Ancestral portraits with knowing eyes, shelves laden with ancient tomes, sculptures that seemed to breathe in the dim light. The silence of the house was profound, broken only by the distant murmur of the storm and the soft rustle of their footsteps on thick oriental rugs. Her suite was magnificent, a symphony of warm golds and deep blues. A four-poster bed, draped in heavy velvet, dominated the room. A fire crackled invitingly in a stone hearth, casting a soft golden glow. On a small table, a crystal decanter of amber liquid and 2 glasses awaited. "A little something to ward off the chill," Julian said, his voice softer here, more intimate. "Please make yourself at home. I'll have dinner prepared in an hour. We can meet in the drawing room." He paused at the doorway, his hand resting lightly on the polished wood. "And Elara, your work is exquisite. I followed it for some time. I have very high expectations for this commission." His gaze swept over her once more, a slow, deliberate appraisal that made her skin tingle. Then, with a nod, he was gone, leaving her alone in the opulent silence. She moved through the suite like a ghost, touching the velvet curtains, running her fingers over the silk throw on the bed. Everything was designed for comfort, for indulgence. The scent in the room was delicate, a blend of lavender and cashmere, designed to soothe. She felt a strange dichotomy: the intense thrill of being in his presence, and the comforting cocoon of the space. After a quick shower, the warm water balm against the day's tension, she changed into a dress she'd packed on a whim, a deep emerald green, its fabric a fluid silk jersey that draped elegantly, revealing the curve of her collarbones and the gentle swell of her hips. She chose it because it felt luxurious, yet understated. She wanted to feel confident, not overshadowed by Julian's formidable presence. When she descended the grand staircase, the manor seemed to have taken on a different aura. The lighting was softer, more inviting, and the scent of a gourmet meal wafted from somewhere in the depths of the house. Julian was waiting in the drawing room, a glass of something dark in his hand. He stood by the roaring fire, his silhouette framed by the leaping flames. He had changed into a dark velvet smoking jacket that only enhanced his lean physique, making him look like a character from a romantic novel. He turned as she entered, and his eyes, luminous in the firelight, took her in. The corners of his lips quirked upwards in that subtle, knowing smile. "Elara," he murmured, his gaze lingering. "You look breathtaking." A blush crept up her neck, a heat she hadn't anticipated. She felt a sudden intense awareness of her body, of the way the silk clung to her, of the pulse beating a little faster at her throat. "Thank you, Julian. You look equally distinguished." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through the room. "Please come. Let me pour you something. I thought a fine burgundy might be appropriate for the evening." He moved with an innate grace, pouring the wine into a delicate crystal glass. Their fingers brushed as she took it, a spark passing between them, an electric current that made her retract her hand a little too quickly. He didn't miss it. His eyes held a knowing glint. They settled on 2 deep leather armchairs by the fire. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling around the ancient stones of the manor, making the warmth and intimacy of the drawing room feel even more profound. "Tell me," Julian began, his voice soft, "what inspired you to choose such an ethereal medium for your art? Fragrance, textiles, they're so intrinsically linked to memory, to emotion, to the very fabric of our being." Elara took a sip of the wine. It was exquisite, deep and complex, much like the man beside her. "I've always been drawn to the unseen, the felt. A painting captures a moment, but a scent evokes an entire world, a forgotten feeling. And textiles, particularly velvet, they invite touch, they whisper stories. They are both ephemeral and enduring." She looked at him then, truly looked. "You commissioned Velvet Whis. The name itself suggests a secret, a soft revelation. What do you hope for it to evoke, Julian?" He leaned back, his long fingers drumming lightly on the armrest, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "I want it to be an experience, a culmination of desires, of quiet passions. I want it to be a scent, a texture, that speaks of intimacy, of unspoken promises. Something that wraps around you like a second skin, a whisper against your pulse." His voice had deepened, growing richer, more suggestive with each word. He turned his head slowly, his eyes locking with hers again. I want it to be the scent of anticipation, Elara. The feeling right before everything. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with an unspoken understanding. The everything hung in the air between them, a tantalizing promise. Elara felt a blush deepen on her cheeks, a warmth spreading through her veins that had nothing to do with the fire. It's an ambitious brief, she managed, her voice a little breathless. To capture such a nuanced emotion. But not impossible for you, he interjected, his voice firm, confident. I believe you possess the sensitivity, the depth, to translate that into something tangible, something unforgettable. Dinner was served in a smaller, more intimate dining room. The table was set for two, with silver, crystal, and soft candlelight. The conversation flowed easily, moving from art and philosophy to travel and shared passions. Elara found herself opening up to him in ways she rarely did with strangers. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, as if every word she uttered was a precious secret. He spoke of his own work, his vast art collection, his love for collecting rare and beautiful things. I'm drawn to beauty in all its forms, Elara. Not just superficial aesthetics, but the soul behind the creation. The passion poured into it. He paused, a faint smile playing on his lips. And I confess, I'm particularly drawn to the beauty that is often overlooked, or perhaps deliberately hidden. His gaze was unnervingly direct, making her feel as though he saw straight through her carefully constructed defenses. As the meal progressed, the initial formality between them began to fray, replaced by a delicate dance of wit and suggestion. She found herself laughing more freely, responding to his subtle provocations with a playful challenge. There was a raw, intelligent hunger in his eyes that both thrilled and unnerved her. After dinner, they returned to the drawing room. The storm outside seemed to have reached its crescendo, the wind rattling the old windows like a restless spirit. But inside, the fire roared, and the room felt like a sanctuary. Julian poured them a digestive, a rich, dark brandy. He handed her the snifter, his fingers brushing hers again. This time, the contact lingered for a fraction of a second longer, a deliberate touch that sent a shiver of awareness through her. So, the velvet Whis, he said, settling back into his armchair. His voice a warm murmur. Have you begun to formulate the essence? The core of it? Elara took a sip of the brandy, its warmth spreading through her. I have. I envision layers, a top note of something bright and fleeting, like a whispered invitation, perhaps bergamot and a hint of white tea. Then the heart, the true core, a rich damask rose, but not overly sweet, balanced with the deep, sensual earthiness of patchouli and a touch of aged leather. And finally, the big. She hesitated, then continued, her voice softer, more vulnerable. It's meant to be a scent that isn't loud, but rather clings, a soft echo that invites closeness, something you discover, rather than announce. Julian was watching her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were alight with an intense focus. Intriguing, he said, his voice husky. And the velvet itself, how do you translate that into a scent? It's the texture, Elara explained, leaning forward slightly, caught up in the passion of her craft. The way it feels against the skin. Soft, rich, but with a hidden depth, a subtle nap that catches the light differently. In the fragrance, it's the interplay of the patchouli and the sandalwood, creating that almost tactile warmth, that luxurious darkness. He rose from his chair and walked towards the fireplace, picking up a swatch of dark, shimmering fabric from the mantelpiece. It was a piece of velvet, a deep, midnight blue that seemed to absorb the light. He held it out to her. This is the velvet I had in mind, he said, his voice a low thrum. Feel it. Elara took the fabric from him. It was incredibly soft, dense and cool to the touch, yet it promised warmth. She ran her fingers over its pile, feeling the subtle shift in texture. It was exactly as she'd imagined. As she held the velvet, Julian moved closer. He reached out and gently took her hand, turning it over so her palm was facing upwards. His thumb brushed lightly over her skin, sending a jolt through her. Then, slowly, deliberately, he placed the velvet swatch directly onto her palm, pressing it down softly. "Imagine this," he murmured, his voice now a low, intimate whisper, his gaze fixed on her hand, then slowly rising to meet her eyes. "This velvet pressed against your skin. And then, the scent. The velvet whis blooming from that touch." His fingers were still gently cupping her hand, the warmth of his skin seeping into hers. The contact was electric, a slow-burning fire that spread through her veins. She could feel the delicate hairs on her arm rising. The air thickened around them, heavy with unspoken desire. He leaned in, his head tilting, his eyes searching hers, dark and luminous in the firelight. His breath, warm and faintly scented with brandy, ghosted across her cheek, sending a shiver through her. She could feel the subtle shift in his body, the tension in his shoulders, the promise in his proximity. "Do you feel it, Ilara?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm's roar. The whisper of it? The anticipation? Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Her lips parted slightly, unable to form a coherent response. All she could do was gaze back at him, lost in the intoxicating depths of his eyes. He was so close now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the rich, masculine scent of him more intensely. His other hand lifted, slowly, almost reverently, and reached towards her face. Her breath hitched. His thumb traced the curve of her jawline, a feather-light touch that sent tremors through her entire being. Her eyelids fluttered, a soft sigh escaping her lips. She could feel the magnetic pull between them, a powerful current drawing them closer. The world outside, the raging storm, the ancient manor, all faded into a distant hum. There was only the fire, the velvet in her hand, and Julian's intense, unwavering gaze. He lowered his head, his eyes still locked with hers, a silent question, an undeniable invitation. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her lips, taste the faint, lingering scent of brandy. Time seemed to stop, suspended in this exquisite moment of pure, unadulterated tension. Just as his lips were about to meet hers, a sudden, violent gust of wind rattled the windows, causing the fire to flare and dim simultaneously. The brief, unexpected flicker broke the spell. Julian paused, his lips still inches from hers, his thumb still caressing her jaw. His eyes, though still intense, held a glint of self-awareness, a momentary retreat from the precipice. He slowly straightened, his hand dropping from her face, his gaze still holding hers, but the immediate, raw intensity had softened into something more contemplative, more controlled. "It seems even Blackwood Manor wants to remind us of the storm outside," he said, his voice a little rougher than before, a low tremor still present. He looked at the velvet swatch still in her hand. "Perhaps it's best we let the velvet whis marinate a little longer, Ilara. Both the scent and the feeling." He took a step back, creating a sliver of space between them, but the air remained thick with the unspoken. "It's late. You've had a long journey. I'm sure you'll sleep well. We can discuss the finer details in the morning after a restful night." His gaze swept over her one last time, a promise lingering in its depths. "Good night, Ilara." With a final lingering look that spoke volumes, he turned and walked towards the door, leaving her standing by the fire, the velvet swatch still clutched in her hand, her heart still hammering, and the ghost of his breath still warm on her lips. The velvet whis had indeed begun to bloom, a silent, potent force within her. And she knew with a certainty that thrilled her to her core, that this was only the very beginning. The door clicked shut with a soft final sound that resonated through the grand hall, leaving Ilara enveloped in a sudden, profound silence. The fire, which moments ago had seemed to roar with their shared intensity, now settled into a quiet crackle, its flames dancing a private, mesmerizing ballet. Julian was gone, but his presence lingered, an invisible shroud woven from the scent of his cologne, the echo of his voice, and the indelible imprint of his touch. Her fingers, still clutching the swatch of velvet, trembled ever so slightly. The fabric, rich and deep, felt like a living thing against her palm, a tangible reminder of the intoxicating challenge he had laid at her feet. Her heart, a wild, untamed bird, hammered against her ribs, refusing to settle. The ghost of his breath, a tender warmth, still hovered on her lips, a phantom kiss that promised so much more than mere air. She stood there, rooted to the spot, for what felt like an eternity, though it was likely only a few minutes. Her mind replayed the scene, frame by agonizing frame. The slow, deliberate approach, the way his eyes had held hers, a silent conversation passing between them. The brush of his thumb, so light, so potent. The husky whisper of her name. And that look, a deep, knowing gaze that had stripped away her composure and left her feeling utterly, gloriously exposed. The velvet whis, he had called it. And indeed, it had begun to bloom, not just as a concept, but as a tangible sensation, a warm, liquid heat unfurling deep within her, spreading through her veins like a potent elixir. It was a thrilling, dangerous sensation, a blossoming of awareness and desire she hadn't known she possessed. Finally, with a soft sigh that seemed to release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, Illyra moved. Her legs felt a little unsteady, as if the floor beneath her had shifted. She walked towards the mantelpiece, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames, and carefully, almost reverently, placed the velvet swatch beside a small, intricately carved jade ornament. It felt too precious to simply set aside, too significant to be forgotten. It was a token, a promise, a challenge. She ascended the grand staircase, the plush carpet muffling her footsteps. The house, usually so grand and imposing, now felt imbued with a new kind of magic, a subtle electricity that tingled in the air. Each portrait on the wall seemed to gaze at her with knowing eyes, each shadow in the corners held a secret. Her own room, when she reached it, offered little solace from the tumultuous storm within her. The soft glow of the bedside lamp cast a warm pool of light, but it did little to dispel the heightened awareness that now coursed through her. She peeled off her gown, letting the silk whisper to the floor, like a forgotten dream. Her skin felt alive, sensitized, every nerve ending humming with the memory of his proximity. She caught her reflection in the full-length mirror, her eyes wide, cheeks flushed, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her stance. This was not the Illyra she had known a few short hours ago. The velvet whis had indeed begun its transformation. She slipped into a silk nightdress, the fabric cool against her heated skin, then moved to the window. The moon, a silver sliver in the vast canvas of the night, cast long ethereal shadows across the sprawling gardens. She wondered if Julian was still awake, if his thoughts, like hers, were consumed by the charged silence that had fallen between them. She pictured him in her mind's eye, the sharp planes of his face, the dark intensity of his gaze, the controlled power in his movements. He was a force, an enigma, and he had awakened something within her that she now knew could never be fully quelled. Sleep, when it finally came, was a restless companion. Her dreams were vivid, fragmented tapestries of sensation. The scent of old paper and cypress, the brush of velvet against her skin, the warmth of an unseen hand, the low murmur of a voice she couldn't quite decipher, yet knew instinctively belonged to him. She woke before dawn, the first hint of rose and gold painting the eastern sky, her body humming with a strange, exhilarating energy. The following morning was infused with a new kind of awareness. The familiar rhythms of the manor, the distant clinking of porcelain from the kitchen, the hushed voices of the staff, the faint scent of coffee and beeswax, were now perceived through a heightened filter. Illyra dressed with unusual care, choosing a soft, flowing gown of deep sapphire, its color echoing the depths of Julian's eyes. She allowed herself a touch more perfumed than usual, a delicate floral scent, with a hint of something deeper, more musky, hoping it might linger, invitingly. Breakfast in the sun-drenched conservatory was a solitary affair. She picked at her food, her gaze constantly drawn to the grand archways and the garden beyond, half expecting, half dreading, Julian's appearance. But he did not come. The absence was almost as potent as his presence, a lingering tension that coiled in her stomach. After breakfast, unable to settle, she decided on a walk through the gardens. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the intoxicating scent of damp earth and late-blooming roses. The labyrinthine paths and manicured hedges offered a sense of privacy, a haven for her tumultuous thoughts. She found herself drawn to a particular stone bench nestled beneath a weeping willow, its branches trailing mournfully to the ground. It was a secluded spot, perfect for contemplation. As she sat, her gaze drifted to a small enclosed rose garden nearby, a riot of crimson and cream petals. Tucked almost out of sight, nestled amongst the thorns, was a single, perfect bloom, its petals a deep, velvety burgundy, the exact shade of the swatch Julian had given her. A jolt, sharp and exhilarating, went through her. Could it be? Had he planted it? Or was it merely a coincidence, her mind playing tricks, connecting every beautiful thing to him? She rose and approached the rose, her fingers gently tracing the silken edge of a petal. It felt impossibly soft, impossibly rich, echoing the texture of the velvet swatch. A soft rustle from the path behind her made her turn, her heart giving a hopeful leap. But it was only one of the gardeners, a young man meticulously tending to a bed of lavender. Disappointment, swift and keen, pricked at her. She realized with a startling clarity how much she craved his presence, how much she yearned for their next encounter. The velvet whis was not just a sensation, it was a hunger. She spent the better part of the morning wandering, her senses alive to every detail, every nuance of the estate. She visited the library, running her hand along the spines of ancient tomes, imagining Julian here, perhaps late at night, a single lamp illuminating his face as he delved into obscure texts. She pictured him, strong and focused, lost in thought, and the image sent a shiver of warmth through her. It wasn't until late afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, that she finally saw him. She was making her way back towards the main house, having spent the last hour sketching in a secluded gazebo, trying to channel her restless energy into art. As she rounded a corner of the grand promenade, she saw him emerge from a side door, a stable boy holding the reins of a magnificent black stallion. Julian, dressed in riding breeches and a fitted jacket, looked utterly magnificent, a creature of raw power and elegance. His dark hair was slightly tousled, catching the golden light, and his profile, sharp and aristocratic, was etched against the fading sky. He hadn't seen her yet. He spoke a few quiet words to the stable boy, his voice a low murmur that carried faintly on the breeze. Then, with an effortless grace that belied his strength, he swung himself into the saddle. The horse, a magnificent beast, with eyes like polished obsidian, tossed its head, whinnying softly. Julian's hand, strong and capable, stroked its neck, a silent communication passing between man and animal. Ilara felt her breath catch in her throat. There was something primal, utterly captivating in his command, his ease in the saddle. He was a man of the earth, of instinct, yet imbued with an intellect that was formidable. It was a potent combination. He turned his head then, as if sensing her presence, his gaze sweeping across the garden until it locked onto hers. A slow, knowing smile, that familiar, utterly devastating curve of his lips, spread across his face. It wasn't a wide, boisterous smile, but a private one, meant only for her, a silent acknowledgement of the lingering tension between them. His eyes, those deep, fathomless pools, held hers, and in their depths she saw a flicker of something new, a subtle challenge, an invitation. He made no move to dismount, nor did he call out to her. Instead, he simply held her gaze for a long charged moment, a silent conversation unfolding between them across the expanse of the garden. The air thrummed with unspoken words, with the weight of the previous night, and the promise of what was yet to come. The velvet whis surged within her, a warm, insistent throb, urging her forward closer. Then, with a slight dip of his head, a gesture that was both courteous and utterly confident, he reined his horse around. The stallion, sensing its rider's intent, cantered gracefully away, its hooves kicking up soft puffs of dust from the gravel path. Elara watched him go, a wistful ache blooming in her chest, yet a thrill of anticipation coursing through her veins. He was leaving, but his departure felt less like an ending, and more like a deliberate pause in a dance. A calculated withdrawal designed to heighten the yearning. She walked back to the house, her mind racing. The brief encounter had been more potent than any lengthy conversation. It was a game, a very sophisticated, very sensual game, and Julian was a master player. He was allowing the anticipation to build, letting the velvet whis take root and flourish within her, knowing that the longer the wait, the more intoxicating the next touch, the next word would be. Later that evening, as she dined alone in the grand dining room, the silence felt heavier than usual. She found herself tracing patterns on the linen tablecloth, her thoughts consumed by the image of Julian on his horse, the glint in his eye. She wondered where he had ridden, what he had thought about. Had he thought of her? After dinner, unable to face another solitary evening in her room, she drifted towards the music room, hoping to find some distraction in the piano. Her fingers, usually so nimble, felt clumsy as she tried to coax a melody from the keys. The music, though beautiful, couldn't quite soothe the restless energy that pulsed beneath her skin. She rose and moved towards the shelves that lined one wall, filled with antique sheet music. As she ran her fingers over the aged paper, her gaze fell upon a small, leather-bound volume tucked away behind a collection of sonatas. It looked out of place, smaller and older than the surrounding music. Curiosity piqued, she pulled it out. It was a book of poetry, its title etched in faded gold. Whispers of the Heart Hymn. As she opened it, a single dried rose petal, a deep, velvety burgundy, fluttered from between the pages and landed softly on the polished wood of the piano. It was the same shade as the rose in the garden, the same shade as the velvet swatch. Her heart gave a sudden, sharp leap. This couldn't be a coincidence. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the petal, her gaze falling on the page it had marked. The poem was untitled, but its words seemed to leap out at her, echoing the very feelings that had consumed her since Julian's arrival. A silent bloom, in shadows deep. Oh, where hidden longings softly sleep. Well? A breath, a glance, a whispered plea, convulsed the heart, wild and free. Of velvet touch and fire's gleam, awakening a vibrant dream. In a truth untold, in eyes so bright. A promise held within the night. Thou's may hand as the tendrils gently twine. Soul awakened, now divine. Elara reread the poem, her breath catching with each line. Silent bloom, in shadows deep, a velvet touch and fire's gleam, awakening a vibrant dream. It was too perfect, too poignant. It spoke of the velvet whis, of their charged encounter by the fire, of the awakening within her. She knew with an absolute certainty that this book, this poem, this very petal, was from Julian. It was another one of his carefully placed breadcrumbs, another layer to his intricate game. He hadn't needed to speak to her today. He had communicated his presence, his thoughts, his intentions, in a language far more potent than words. It was a message that resonated deep within her soul, a silent declaration of his awareness of her, of the connection forging between them. She held the rose petal gently, feeling its fragile texture against her thumb. The scent, though faint, was still there, a ghost of summer, a memory of beauty. She closed the book, clutching it, and the petal to her chest, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. Anticipation, wonder, and a thrilling sense of being truly seen, truly desired. He was playing a dangerous game, one that stirred the very depths of her being. And the velvet whis, now fully bloomed, was urging her to play along. The night deepened around her, but Elara felt more awake, more alive than ever before. She knew, with a certainty that hummed in her veins, that the next move in their exquisite dance was hers to make. And she was ready. More than ready. And she was ready. More than ready. The air, thick with the intoxicating perfume of the velvet Whis, seemed to hold its breath as Ilara made her decision. Her gaze, which had been locked with his across the moon-drenched conservatory, softened into a silent invitation, a dare in return. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, the whisper of her silk gown against her legs, a faint rustle in the hushed space. Another step. And another. Each movement was a conscious act, a surrender to the exquisite current that pulled her towards him. He remained utterly still, a study in elegant repose, his eyes never leaving hers. A faint smile played on his lips, a knowing curve that acknowledged her response, her acceptance of the unspoken challenge. There was no triumph in it, only a profound sense of recognition, as if he had simply been waiting for her to catch up to a truth they both already knew. The distance between them, initially vast, dwindled with each measured pace. The moonlight, filtering through the arched glass ceiling, cast his features in a silvery glow, deepening the shadows beneath his high cheekbones, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. She noticed the slight tremor in her own hand, resting lightly at her side, and the quickening beat of her heart, a frantic drum against her ribs. Finally she stood before him, the space between their bodies now almost imperceptible, charged with an almost unbearable tension. She could feel the subtle warmth radiating from him, smell the faint, alluring scent of his cologne, a sophisticated blend of sandalwood and something wild, untamed. Her eyes, still locked with his, dipped briefly to his mouth. Those beautifully sculpted lips that held so much promise, so much unspoken desire. "You answered," he murmured, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the very air, through her very being. It wasn't a question, but an affirmation, a recognition of her bold step. "Did you doubt I would?" she countered, her voice a little breathy, a little huskier than she intended. A spark ignited in his eyes, a glint of appreciation for her spirit. "I hoped," he admitted, his gaze sweeping over her face, lingering on her parted lips, then rising again to meet her eyes. "There's a fire in you, Ilara, a magnificent, untamed flame." A shiver, delicious and dangerous, traced a path down her spine. His words were like a key turning in a lock, unlocking something deep within her that she hadn't known was caged. "And you, Lord Arion," she whispered, giving him his title for the first time, testing its sound on her tongue, seemed to delight in stoking it. His smile deepened, a slow, sensual unfolding that stole her breath. Perhaps he conceded, his hand, with a movement so fluid and natural it seemed almost inevitable, reached out. It didn't touch her directly, but instead brushed the delicate, almost invisible lace of her sleeve, tracing the path along her forearm. A feather-like caress that left a trail of pure sensation in its wake. "Perhaps I do." The contact was minimal, yet it was everything. Every nerve ending in her arm, in her entire body, hummed to life. She felt herself lean imperceptibly into his touch, a silent plea for more. The velvet Whis, now a vibrant presence at the edge of her awareness, seemed to throb with the same potent energy that surged between them. Its velvety petals, an impossibly deep shade of indigo, seemed to unfurl further, releasing a wave of heady sweetness that made her head swim. "The velvet Whis," she said, her voice a little shaky, trying to anchor herself to something tangible amidst the intoxicating swirl of emotion. "It blooms only at night, doesn't it?" "Only under the moon," he confirmed, his fingers still teasing the lace at her wrist, occasionally brushing the warmth of her skin. "And only for those who truly see its beauty, Ilara. Those who are open to its magic." His eyes held hers, a silent question in their depths. "Are you open to magic?" "Caras, day." She felt a blush creep up her neck, a telltale flush that betrayed the intensity of her feelings. "It's captivating," she managed, her gaze dropping to the intricate pattern his fingers were tracing on her sleeve. Her skin beneath the fabric felt alive, sensitized, yearning for the direct touch of his hand. He chuckled softly, a low, rich sound that seemed to resonate deep within her. "Much like yourself, my dear, captivating." And then, With a movement that was both gentle and utterly commanding, his fingers finally closed around her wrist, his thumb brushing the racing pulse point there. The warmth of his skin against hers was immediate, electric, sending a jolt straight through her veins. He didn't pull her, didn't tug. He simply held her, his touch a silent anchor in the swirling tempest of her senses. Her breath hitched in her throat, her lips parting slightly. She felt utterly exposed, yet wonderfully safe, desired. "Come," he murmured, his voice now lower, more intimate, a secret shared only between them. He gently turned her wrist, his fingers still laced with hers, and led her away from the moonlit center of the conservatory, towards a secluded alcove bathed in softer, more diffused light. Heavy velvet drapes, drawn back to reveal tall, arched windows overlooking a sprawling, shadowy garden, created a sense of opulent privacy. A plush chaise lounge beckoned, draped in rich fabrics, promising comfort and clandestine intimacy. She followed without hesitation, her hand nestled perfectly in his, her steps light, almost buoyant. The world outside their immediate circle seemed to fade, becoming a blurry backdrop to the sharp, vivid reality of his presence. Each brush of their hands, each shared glance, wove an intricate tapestry of desire and anticipation. As they reached the alcove, he released her hand, but only to place it gently on her lower back, his palm warm against the silk of her gown. His touch guided her towards the chaise, a silent command that she implicitly understood. She sank onto the soft cushions, the fabric cool against her skin, her eyes never leaving his. He didn't sit beside her, but instead remained standing, towering over her, his presence utterly magnetic. "You seem intrigued," he observed, his voice a silken caress. "Intrigued doesn't begin to cover it, Lord Arian," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at him, her neck arching slightly, her vulnerability, a tangible thing between them. "I feel as though I've walked into a dream, or perhaps a very old story." "And what kind of story do you imagine it to be, Ilara?" he asked, his eyes dancing with a playful intensity. He leaned closer, resting one hand on the back of the chaise just beside her head. The scent of him, that intoxicating blend, enveloped her completely. She could feel the subtle heat of his body, the faint rustle of his clothing as he moved. "One where the heroine is utterly swept away," she admitted, her gaze locked on his, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. "And perhaps a little lost." His free hand, the one that hadn't been on her back, now lifted, slowly, deliberately towards her face. Her breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, anticipating the touch, the exquisite sensation. When his fingertips finally brushed her cheek, it was with a tenderness that surprised her, a soft, almost reverent caress that sent a flood of warmth through her. "Never lost, Ilara," he murmured, his voice a soft promise. His thumb traced the delicate curve of her cheekbone, then moved to the corner of her eye, brushing away a stray, invisible tear, or perhaps simply acknowledging the depth of emotion brimming there. Only found. The touch was a revelation. It wasn't merely physical. It was an acknowledgement, a connection that reached beyond the skin, directly to the soul. She leaned into his palm, a silent plea for him to stay, for the moment to stretch into eternity. Her eyelids fluttered open, her gaze meeting his, swimming with a mixture of wonder and longing. "You have a way of seeing things," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Things I didn't even know were there." "Only what you allow me to see," he corrected gently, his fingers tangling in a stray lock of hair near her temple, tucking it behind her ear. His touch lingered there, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin just beneath her earlobe, sending a shiver through her. "And what you show me, Ilara, is truly breathtaking." His words, spoken with such quiet sincerity, disarmed her completely. The barriers she hadn't even realized she was holding melted away. She found herself reaching up, her hand tentatively finding his, the one still cupping her cheek. Her fingers threaded through his, her palm pressing against his, a silent communion. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and brought it to his lips. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to the back of her hand, his lips warm and yielding against her skin. The gesture was courtly, yet intensely intimate, a perfect blend of old-world charm and raw, undeniable passion. She felt a delicious tremor ripple through her, her body arching imperceptibly towards him. "This story," he began, his voice a low thrum, his eyes still holding hers. "It has only just begun, Elara." He released her hand, but only to trail his fingers slowly, sensually, down her arm, over her elbow, along the delicate line of her forearm, until his fingertips brushed her wrist once more. This time, his touch was more confident, more possessive. "And what happens next?" she breathed, her voice barely audible, her entire being focused on his every movement, every subtle shift in his expression. He smiled, a slow, mesmerizing smile that promised worlds. "That, my dear, is for us to discover, together." With that, he sat down on the chaise beside her, the plush cushions sinking slightly under his weight. The proximity was immediate, overwhelming. Their thighs brushed, sending a jolt through her. She was acutely aware of the warmth of his body, the broad expanse of his chest, the faint scent of him that now filled her every breath. He turned fully towards her, his arm resting along the back of the chaise, his hand dangerously close to her shoulder. Her gaze, drawn inexorably, found his. The moonlight, now a softer, more intimate glow in their secluded alcove, seemed to intensify the depth of his eyes, turning them into pools of dark, liquid desire. "Tell me," he began, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible whisper, "what is it you truly desire, Lara? Here, in this dream, in this story we are weaving?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning, with unspoken longing. It was a direct challenge, a demand for honesty, for vulnerability. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. She knew with absolute certainty that her answer would set the course for the rest of the night, perhaps even beyond. She looked at him, truly looked, past the handsome features, past the elegant attire, into the very essence of the man who had so effortlessly captivated her. And in his eyes she saw a reflection of her own burgeoning desire, a hunger that matched hers, an understanding that transcended words. "I desire," she started, her voice a little choked, her gaze dropping to his strong, capable hands, then back to his intense eyes. "I desire to feel everything, to be utterly consumed." Her confession hung in the air, raw and potent. A flicker of something primal crossed his face, a deepening of his gaze that sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He didn't speak, but his response was clear in the subtle tightening of his jaw, the slight parting of his lips, the almost imperceptible lean of his body towards hers. His hand, which had been resting on the back of the chaise, now moved, slowly, deliberately. His fingertips brushed against the bare skin of her shoulder, just above the strap of her gown. The touch was light, tentative, yet it felt like a brand, searing her skin. He lingered there, his thumb tracing the delicate curve of her collarbone, sending shivers down her arm. "Consumed," he repeated, his voice a low, husky growl that vibrated through her, awakening every dormant cell. A beautiful, dangerous desire. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingering there, a silent promise. "And one I believe I can fulfill." Her breath hitched. The air between them crackled, with an almost unbearable tension. A silent symphony of unspoken wants. Her lips parted further, a silent invitation. A desperate plea. She felt herself drawn to him, an invisible thread pulling her closer, closer still. He leaned in, his face now inches from hers. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek, smell the intoxicating scent of him, stronger now, more potent. Her eyes fluttered closed, her head tilting back slightly, offering herself to him. "Elara," he whispered, his voice a mere breath against her lips, the sound of her name a caress, a benediction. And then, finally, his lips met hers. It was not a forceful kiss, not a sudden, aggressive plunge. Instead, it was a slow, tender exploration, a gentle press that conveyed a universe of restrained passion. His lips were soft, yielding, yet firm, promising depths yet to be plumbed. She responded instantly, her own lips parting beneath his, welcoming the sweet invasion. A sigh escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound of pure bliss. She felt her body relax into the chaise, melting against the cushions, utterly consumed by the sensation of his mouth on hers. His hand, which had been on her shoulder, now moved, sliding around her neck, his fingers tangling in the soft hair at her nape, gently cradling her head. The other hand came to rest lightly on her waist, drawing her imperceptibly closer, until there was no space left between them, only the delicious press of their bodies. The kiss deepened, slowly, exquisitely. It was a dance of lips and tongues, a languid, sensual exploration that tasted of starlight and forbidden fruit. She felt his body against hers, warm and solid, reassuringly masculine. The faint scent of the velvet Whis, mingling with his own intoxicating aroma, filled her senses, blurring the edges of reality, plunging her into a dreamlike state. She kissed him back with an intensity that surprised her, a surge of long-suppressed desire unleashed. Her fingers, which had been resting lightly on his arm, now tightened, clutching the fabric of his jacket, seeking connection. Seeking connection. She wanted to pull him closer, to devour him, to lose herself completely in this intoxicating moment. His thumb stroked the sensitive skin at the base of her skull, sending shivers of pure pleasure down her spine. He groaned softly, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against her lips, a clear indication of his own deepening passion. The kiss became more urgent, more demanding, yet still imbued with a profound tenderness that stirred her heart as much as her body. She felt a dizzying rush, a wild euphoria that threatened to sweep her away. Every nerve ending sang, every cell thrummed with a vibrant, exquisite energy. This was more than just a kiss, it was a revelation, a communion of souls, a promise of everything she had ever longed for. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, their lips lingering, brushing, before finally separating. His forehead rested against hers, his eyes still closed for a moment, as if savoring the afterglow. When he finally opened them, they were dark, intense, burning with a profound desire that mirrored her own. "Elara," he breathed again, her name a prayer on his lips. "You are magnificent." She could only gaze at him, breathless, her body trembling with the force of the emotions coursing through her. Her lips felt swollen, tender, tingling from his kiss. She reached up, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her touch. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips once more, pressing a series of soft, lingering kisses to her palm, her knuckles, her fingertips. Each kiss was a promise, a whisper of more to come. "This story," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "is only just truly beginning." He looked into her eyes, a profound understanding passing between them. The moonlight, now high in the sky, cast long silvery shadows across the conservatory floor. The velvet Whis seemed to glow with an ethereal light, its perfume heavier, richer, urging them deeper, into the intoxicating night. Elara knew, with a certainty that hummed in her very bones, that she was utterly, irrevocably, and beautifully lost in his gaze, in his touch, in this exquisite dream from which she never wanted to awaken. The night was young, and their dance had only just found its rhythm. His hands, warm and knowing, slid from her waist, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, sending shivers through the thin silk of her dress. Her own fingers, emboldened by the intoxicating night, found purchase in the silken strands at the nape of his neck, drawing him closer still. The world beyond them ceased to exist, dissolving into a symphony of whispers, and the heavy, sweet breath of the conservatory. Their lips met again, this time with a hunger that had been simmering beneath the surface, a slow-burning ember now fanned into a bright, consuming flame. It was a kiss that spoke of discovery, of long-awaited yearning, of a profound recognition that transcended mere physical attraction. His mouth was a revelation, soft, firm, exploring, demanding, offering. Ilara responded with an abandon that surprised her, her own lips parting to invite him deeper, her tongue dancing with his in a sensual ballet. The taste of him was an exotic blend of night air, a hint of spice, and something uniquely masculine that made her senses reel. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her, and his grip tightened, molding her body against his. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the muscular strength of his thighs, the undeniable proof of his desire pressing against her. A soft gasp escaped her as his hand slipped lower, cupping the swell of her bottom, lifting her slightly, pressing her more intimately into him. The sensation was electric, a jolt of pure pleasure that shot straight to her core, making her knees tremble. She arched into his touch, a silent plea for more, her fingers tangling deeper in his hair as the kiss deepened, becoming a desperate exchange of breath and passion. The velvet Whis, as if sentient, seemed to unfurl its petals further, releasing its potent perfume in intoxicating waves that swirled around them, an invisible cloud of desire. It was a scent that promised forbidden delights, that whispered of surrender and ecstasy. Ilara felt herself dissolving into it, into him, becoming liquid and pliant in his arms. He broke the kiss, reluctantly, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling in the scented air. His eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, searched hers, filled with an intensity that took her breath away. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, husky rumble that sent delicious tremors through her. "You are exquisite. More beautiful than any flower in this garden." His thumb stroked the delicate skin beneath her eye, a tender gesture that belied the burning passion in his gaze. "And you?" she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion, "are a dream I never knew I craved." She lifted a trembling hand to trace the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her fingertips, the warmth of his skin. His lips found the sensitive skin beneath her ear, sending shivers down her spine as he nibbled gently, tracing a path down her neck. "I want to lose myself in you," he breathed, his words a warm caress against her skin. "Completely." The unspoken question hung in the air, weighted with anticipation. He pulled back slightly, his eyes holding hers, seeking her consent, her desire. Ilara didn't need words. Her answer was in the way she leaned into him, the way her eyes mirrored his longing, the way her hand tightened on his shoulder. With a soft smile that was both tender and fiercely possessive, he took her hand. "Come with me," he murmured, his voice a promise. He led her from the heart of the conservatory, leaving behind the most densely blooming velvet Whis, though its scent still clung to them, a tantalizing memory. Their path led through dimly lit corridors, hushed and grand, their footsteps echoing softly on polished marble floors. His hand never left hers, his thumb stroking the back of her hand with a rhythm that was both reassuring and electrifying. Each step felt like a journey deeper into a shared dream, a progression from the public splendor of the garden to a private sanctuary. They ascended a sweeping staircase, its banister cool beneath her fingertips. The air grew warmer, infused with the subtle scent of aged wood and beeswax. Finally, he pushed open a heavy carved door, revealing a room bathed in the soft, golden glow of a dozen flickering candles. It was a chamber designed for intimacy. Rich tapestries adorned the walls, depicting serene landscapes and mythical lovers. A grand four-poster bed dominated the room, draped in sheer, flowing fabrics that shimmered in the candlelight, like a cloud waiting to embrace them. The sheets were the color of cream, piled high with plush pillows. A fire crackled softly in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows and infusing the air with a comforting warmth that chased away the last vestiges of the night's chill. He led her to the edge of the bed, his gaze never leaving hers. "This," he said, his voice a gentle caress, "is where our dream truly begins." With slow, deliberate movements, he began to unbutton his shirt, his eyes still locked on hers. Each button released revealed a sliver of taut, bronzed skin, the ripple of muscle beneath. Ilara watched, mesmerized, her breath catching in her throat as the shirt finally fell open, revealing a sculpted chest, broad shoulders, and a dusting of dark hair that tapered to his waist. He was magnificent, a classical statue brought to life, imbued with warmth and pulsing desire. She reached out, her fingers hesitant at first, then bolder, tracing the lines of his chest. His skin was warm and firm beneath her touch. He captured her hand, pressing it against his heart, letting her feel the strong rhythmic beat. "Feel that?" he whispered. "That's for you, Ilara." He then turned his attention to her, his touch reverent as he reached for the delicate straps of her silk dress. His fingers brushed against her collarbone, sending a wave of delicious shivers through her. One by one, he eased the straps down her shoulders, the silk sliding languidly over her skin, revealing the smooth curve of her shoulders, the delicate swell of her breast. Her dress pooled at her feet, a shimmering cascade of midnight blue. She stood before him in only her lace chemise and silken briefs, feeling exquisitely vulnerable, yet powerfully desired. The candlelight played over her skin, painting her in hues of gold and shadow. His eyes devoured her, a silent testament to his admiration, his passion. "You are perfection," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out, his hands gently framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Then slowly he knelt before her, his gaze never leaving hers, and with infinite tenderness, he began to peel away her silken briefs, his fingers brushing against the most intimate part of her, igniting a fiery blush that spread across her chest. Ilara gasped softly as the last barrier between them fell away. She felt exposed, utterly bare, yet she met his gaze with a newfound confidence, a fierce desire that matched his own. He rose, pulling her gently into his arms, their naked bodies meeting for the first time. The sensation was breathtaking. Skin on skin, warmth against warmth, the soft yielding of her curves against his hard planes. A sigh of pure contentment escaped her as she wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her body closer still. His hands roamed over her back, tracing the delicate line of her spine, cupping her bottom, drawing her hips against his, letting her feel the full extent of his readiness. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her the few steps to the bed. He laid her down gently on the cool, crisp sheets, then followed, positioning himself above her, supporting himself on his forearms. The flickering candlelight cast their forms in a timeless dance of shadow and light. His eyes, dark with longing, searched hers. "Are you ready, my Ilara?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, filled with tenderness and raw passion. "More than ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She reached up, her fingers threading through his hair, pulling him down for a kiss that was both a plea and a promise. Their lips met in a searing, soul-claiming kiss. His tongue delved deep, mirroring the deeper intimacy that was to come. His hips pressed against hers, a slow, sensual rhythm beginning to build. He trailed kisses down her jaw, along her throat, to the hollow of her collarbone, each touch igniting a new spark of pleasure. Her hands explored the taut muscles of his back, the broad expanse of his shoulders, the firm curve of his buttocks. She felt his body tremble with restraint, with anticipation. He moved lower, his lips finding the soft swell of her breast, suckling gently, sending waves of exquisite sensation through her. Her back arched, her fingers digging into the sheets, a soft moan escaping her lips. He moved slowly, deliberately, savoring each touch, each sound, each moment of rising desire. His breath was warm on her skin as he kissed a path down her belly, to the soft skin of her inner thigh. Her body was humming, alive with 1,000 tiny sparks, all converging into a single burning need. When he finally looked up, his eyes were burning, mirroring the fire that raged within her. He positioned himself between her legs, their bodies aligning perfectly. Ilara lifted her hips, an unconscious invitation, a silent plea. He entered her slowly, with infinite care. His gaze locked on hers, watching for any sign of discomfort, but finding only boundless desire. A soft gasp escaped her lips as she felt him fill her, a sensation of completion, of homecoming, that resonated deep within her soul. He paused, allowing her body to adjust, to embrace him fully, completely. Then, With a gentle thrust, he began to move, a slow, deliberate rhythm that quickly gathered momentum. Ilara met him stroke for stroke, her body responding instinctively to his. Their breaths mingled, ragged and urgent, their moans intertwining into a symphony of pleasure. The bed creaked softly with their movements, a gentle counterpoint to the rush of blood in their ears, the pounding of their hearts. He leaned down, burying his face in her hair, his lips finding her ear. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice hoarse with passion. "You feel incredible." "Don't stop," she pleaded, her voice breathy, lost in the swirling vortex of sensation. "Never stop." The world outside the four-poster bed dissolved. There was only the firelight, the scent of the velvet Whis that still clung to them, and the exquisite rhythm of their bodies moving as one. Each thrust brought them closer to the edge, to the precipice of pure ecstasy. Her hips arched higher, her legs wrapping around his waist, drawing him deeper, closer. The tension built, a glorious, unbearable pressure that tightened in her core, then exploded in a wave of pure, unadulterated bliss. A cry escaped her lips, a primal sound of release and rapture. He followed moments later, his body tensing, a guttural groan torn from his throat as he emptied himself into her, his name on his lips. They collapsed together, breathless and trembling, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts hammering against each other. He rolled onto his side, pulling her close, tucking her head onto his shoulder, his arm a secure weight around her. The afterglow was as profound as the act itself. A deep, abiding sense of peace settled over Ilara, a warmth that radiated from her very core. She felt utterly cherished, utterly loved. His fingers idly stroked her hair, his lips pressed a soft kiss to her temple. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his voice still a little hoarse but filled with tenderness. "More than all right," she whispered, her voice thick with contentment. "I feel reborn." He chuckled softly, a deep, rumbling sound against her ear. "Good. Because I certainly feel like a new man." He held her tighter, pressing a possessive kiss to her hair. "You, Ilara, are everything I never knew I was missing." Sleep found them intertwined, limbs tangled, breaths synchronized, the dying embers in the hearth casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The scent of the velvet Whis, though fainter now, still permeated the air, a sweet reminder of the night's magic. When Ilara awoke, it was to the gentle kiss of dawn filtering through the sheer drapes. The room was bathed in a soft, ethereal light, the candles long since extinguished. His arm was still around her, his breath warm against her neck. She stirred, stretching languidly, and found his gaze already on her, his eyes warm and filled with an affectionate smile. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he murmured, his voice soft and husky. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still thick with sleep, a blush rising to her cheeks as the memories of the night flooded back. She met his gaze, no longer shy, but filled with a comfortable intimacy that felt as natural as breathing. He leaned in, pressing a soft, tender kiss to her lips. "I could get used to waking up like this." "Me too," she confessed, snuggling closer, feeling the comforting weight of his arm, the solid warmth of his body beside her. They lingered in bed, sharing quiet whispers, soft touches, and the comfortable silence that only true intimacy can bring. He told her his name was Whis, and she found it suited him. Strong, ancient, a name of enduring power. They spoke of small things, of dreams and desires, building a new foundation of understanding with each shared word. Eventually, hunger stirred. Whis rose first, a vision of masculine grace in the soft morning light. He pulled on a silk robe, then found one for her, a luxurious garment that felt like a cloud against her skin. Together, they made their way to a sun-drenched breakfast nook, where a lavish spread awaited them. Fresh fruit, pastries, fragrant coffee, and steaming tea. They ate slowly, their hands often finding each other across the table, their eyes meeting in silent communication. The world outside felt distant, unimportant. Here, In the quiet intimacy of the morning, a beautiful bond had been forged, stronger and more profound than any dream. The velvet Whis, Elara realized, wasn't just a flower. It was a catalyst, a silent witness to a blossoming love. It had drawn them together, weaving its magic around them, guiding them through a night of exquisite discovery. As the sun climbed higher, warming the conservatory and illuminating the world in vibrant hues, Elara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her heart, that this was not merely a dream from which she would awaken. This was real. This was the beginning of a story, a dance that had found its perfect rhythm and promised an eternity of beautiful, passionate movements. And she, Elara, was ready to dance forever.